Hello, everybody. This is Nick Fitzgerald, the Superintendent of Schools at the Canajoharie Central School District. As we talked about in the last couple of videos, we're fastly approaching an important next step to our merger. Lauren Chrisman, the Superintendent of Fort Plain, and I looked through all the notes, comments, concerns with regard to the three thought exchanges, faculty and staff community forums, advisory committee, and student and community focus groups, and gathered common threads that keep coming up with the merger. And what we wanted to do is put a four-step video process through to address these four areas that keep kind of coming up: building usage and district configuration, jobs, finances, which we'll focus on in this presentation, and enrollment class size. The bottom line is we want to make sure everyone has the correct information they need to make an informed decision. Before we go on to finances, just want to talk about what happens next. Community forums are being held through January and February. On March 6th, all residents will have the option to participate in a straw vote. The purpose of the straw vote is to determine if the joint community support to proceed with the merger. If the straw vote passes, then we need signatures for two petitions for the purpose of formally asking the commissioner to set a date for the binding vote, and two, formally request two polling sites, one in each district. On or about April 24th, if the straw vote passes, there'll be what's called a binding vote. That vote will determine either yes or no for the merger, how many Board of Education members we'd like for the new district, 5, 7, or 9, and then how long the Board of Education seats will be. Also understand that why both districts are still operating, there'll be two boards of education, one for Fort Plain and one for Canajoharie. And then as we start to organize for the following year, if everything passes, there'll be a new Board of Education voted in that will operate the new district. And hopefully we can have that put in place by around June 11th. And we're still looking at a July of 2026 start date. So we're going to talk a little bit about the finance side of things, why we're going into the merger. One is foundation aid. Foundation aid is the main source of revenue from New York State that we get to fund our expenses. Foundation aid is something that we look for every year to increase just a little bit to make sure we can keep up with our overall expenses. And what's practically happening every year is foundation aid is going up around $200,000 to $300,000 a year. While that seems good in some senses, our number of expenses are usually excess of $500,000 to $700,000 additional every year. So foundation aid is not growing as fast as we would like for our expenses. The next is local taxes. Local taxes is the next big portion of your revenue source. And since the inception of the tax cap, we've been able to keep taxes at or below the tax cap every single year. And that's great for the community, and it's something that I think both districts would still like to continue to do. The issue with that is when you leave a tax levy at 1.2 or 1.5%, that is very minimal in terms of overall dollars for the district. And next is title grants. There is some federal funding that each district gets, but a big portion of it is in title grants. And I'll go into that a little bit in a second. The next is building aid. We would, if we merged, be eligible for up to possibly 98% of building aid. What that means is if we did a building project of $10 million, it would only cost us $200,000 out of reserves to do that $10 million project. We would get reimbursed $9.8 million from the state. Currently, we're about 90 to 92% in both school districts, but that would jump up to 95 to 98% if we merged. In addition, there would be additional incentive aid of $56 million over 14 years, and I'll go into that in a second. Here's just a little bit of illustrations in terms of what I was talking about with revenue and expenses, how the expenses are outweighing our revenues. And that's a trend we're starting to see more and more. I'll give you an example. Here's the title grants that we have. And title grants are used for things like AIS supports, special education services, SROs, before and after school programming, those type of areas. If you can take a look in 2022 and 23 compared to 2024 and 25, what is happening? We're starting to lose overall funding from our title grants. So as expenses continue to rise, like everything else does in the world, we start to lose revenue. In addition, after all of our revenues and expenses are figured out for our budgets, we have what's left to close the gap. And this year, Canajoharie anticipates using $895,000 of fund balance and reserve to equal out the budget, while Fort Plain anticipates to use $200,000. Now, that's over $1 million of fund balance and reserves between both districts. Now, honestly to say, we hope that fund balance falls out of our budget every year where we don't use all of the expense categories during the school year, but that's not guaranteed. So, for example, there are extra funds put into programs like special education, transportation. You can imagine if gas goes up in the middle of the year. Items such as benefits. If 7 or 8 more people take full benefits as opposed to people who didn't take it the year before. So you always put extra money in those accounts to see what would end up happening. So in most cases, the fund balance falls out to cover these accounts. But once we start using reserves and fund balance, that's when you start to really worry because now you're overstating your budget. Moving on to additional foundation aid, if we did merge, the state would promise us $56.5 million over 14 years. And what's great about that, that allows us to do a couple things. One, to normalize the district when we start to move, transitions, all those things that would take place with the district. We also allow us to keep people on staff during the transition years and while we start to right size due to the fact that enrollment is dropping. So, what would happen through attrition as people would retire, there'd be some positions we wouldn't replace. But we'd have enough funds, if you take a look at the first 5 years, to weather that storm and to make sure that we keep jobs intact for our communities. In addition to this, this would help us levy the tax increases for the next 2 decades. While this says 14 years of funds, as long as we do this correctly in terms of financing and really forecasting out, we can stretch this money beyond the 14 years to help the tax base as well. Moving along to the taxes. This is the great thing about our merger as well. Not only are we only 5 miles apart from each other in schools, but our tax base is small compared to the differences. So, for example, Canajoharie on average, a full tax value is $15.27, while Fort Plain is $15.46. Not much difference there. So, we can use that extra aid money to equalize that. So, everyone will be at 15.27. That way, there's not an additional increase when we start the merger. I want to thank everybody for listening through this. And if you have any questions along the line, please reach out to myself or Superintendent Lauren Chrisman, and we can help you through this process to make sure you make an informed decision moving forward. Thank you.